Denis Lazavik for that defensive effort.
There's a couple moments there we're very worried for Denis, and he was under 20 seconds, but he really does thrive in some technical positions that seem very tough to play. Doesn't seem to phase him whatsoever. That was one of the better played games.
Absolutely, and a good sign. You don't want that. You don't want that result to spiral into more and more losses. So instead, kind of holds that tough position. He's back with the white pieces. He did actually start with c4 in this game, although it's transposed back to sort of this queen's gambit, decline Carlsbad structure, and Eric back in this position here. We have a topical line, bishop d6 and e6, usually with an invitation to kind of go a little bit more for h6 and sometimes g5 to hit this bishop. And bishop d6 is much more aggressive than just bishop e7. You don't care about breaking the pin from the bishop on g5. You're thinking more forward moves, more aggressive, control the center.
Yeah, and you play bishop e6 because you don't want to block your bishop after you play knight d7. Sometimes I've seen queen b8 as a follow-up, strengthen that diagonal.
Again, we do see f3. Knight e2 and f3, it might look unusual. Why are we not developing to the more standard square with knight f3? But this is an idea. If black is not going to play c5, white might play e4, striking in the center. If you take that, the f-pawn recaptures, the f-file opens up, and suddenly the bishops on d6, on e6, the knight on f6, they're under pressure from all these pawn thrusts, d5, e5, all these pieces are running out of squares.
Yeah, those end up being pretty sharp positions, but usually white's very happy to gain the center. And after e4, black's generally forced to take because even any sort of prospect of a pawn chain marching down the board is a bit too much to allow.
Yeah, this sort of standoff between the bishop on f4 and the bishop on d6 right now. Kingside castling. It's quite dangerous to castle on the queen side here for black. There's an easy attack to generate with the b-pawn, so we'll certainly see Hikaru castle kingside, but he's delaying it as long as possible. He feels there's important moves that need to be played, perhaps to deal with the threat of potential e4.
For sure. So a move like rook d8, why does that deal with e4? Well, in some positions, after the inevitable d takes e4, try to generate pressure on the loose d4 pawn.
Yep, and aimed at the queen is a great place to be. That will always make itself useful at the end of a lot of variations and calculations. Just having that rook there, and there you see the move c5. Now, I was expecting maybe the king to castle before going for something like this, but ultimately, he must have felt that e4 was close to happening, and c5 played first. Now, all of a sudden, e4 much less desirable because there's pressure on d4.
e4 is less desirable, but at the same time, why is c5 a risky move? Structurally, it allows the isolated pawn on d5. Maybe I take on c5, place a knight on d4. Even looking at moves like knight b5, forcing probably the exchange on f4. Yep. And then we're happy for a knight to hop in from e2 to f4, put pressure, and he's played it. It just feels like this is just a slightly better position for white, and also in the style of Denis, where you can make slow, improving moves without allowing any slippery counterplay from Hikaru.
And one of the things after bishop takes f4, if we imagine that here, is that the knight can jump into c7. So if you play a move like c4, c takes d4, after bishop takes f4, we can put this here. And let's say c4. You could throw in these moves like knight c7, and then knight takes e6, and you have knight g6. So you can see those in-between moves can be so valuable, which means, going back to the position, we might be able to create this isolated pawn where the c and d pawns exchange, because Hikaru has not castled and needs to do so now.
Or we can just take a pawn.
That's available as well.
Sometimes it's risky to take a pawn, but when you take the pawn, your knight can just jump back into b5, and this certainly wasn't what Hikaru planned. This is going terribly wrong for black.
And this is why we were thinking, well, you kind of want to have that king castled in time. c5 was a move he wanted to play early, but normally you're supposed to be castled, and immediately Hikaru has prepared a very ultra-aggressive g5 move. This is clearly not a move that he was planning or excited to play. It's a move born out of desperation, but Hikaru in these positions on the back foot can sometimes pull off a miracle, but in this position, Denis is ahead.
Well, we've spoken about Hikaru. When he's behind, he likes active counterplay, because this way of playing, you're down a pawn and you're opening up the position, you know that you're improving your opponent's light squared bishop, especially after like d takes e5. But he doesn't want to just sit around, allow exchanges, and end up playing an endgame just down a full pawn. I like this move a lot, by the way, bishop f5.
Yeah, occupying the f5 square. It's never going to be bothered there unless the knight on f6 moves. There's always going to be ideas like bishop takes on d7. A useful move, if white needs one, might be a move surprisingly like a4, just to support this knight, and then you can bring everything over, shift it over. The knight's never going to be loose. And opening the position, it doesn't just favor black because black's looking for counterplay. Black's king is also very exposed, so it's not even clear that this is going to work out.
It's also nice that the knight's on b5 because it takes away black's opportunity to play c4, try to slow things down. You can just play b3, open things up, because black doesn't have b5 to strengthen that pawn chain.
It's just an a pawn, but knight takes a7 is really, it's actually keeping the knight on b5. There's no a6 move. The knight on b5 is not supposed to be able to stay there, and now
Positional
b4,
move.
A very positional move. If you take that pawn, all of a sudden, the knight is very secure. We see c4, but there's going to be an outside pass pawn for white, and this is clearly not what Hikaru was looking for.
No, b4 was to provoke c4, and now you have that beautiful outpost on d4. Centralized, knights are best in the center. They have the most squares. You have knight c6 in some positions, knight e6 in some positions, but you just know that knight's there for the rest of the game. And as you mentioned, at some point, a4, stretch out black's resources. At some point, Hikaru's position is all focused on the king side, but once this pawn starts marching up, he's going to have to allocate some of those pieces to the queen side, and then that initiative starts to disappear.
That's right. The knight on b8 as well wanted to play knight c6. Knight on d4 prevented that. The bishop on f5 can consider retreating in order to allow the knight on d4 access to the f5 square. This is a moment where that g-pawn, Hikaru's probably thinking, well, if I could just take that back to g7, that's the ideal place for it. You do not want that pawn overextended. Bishop a4 is an idea. Definitely, all Denis in this position, Hikaru absolutely on the back foot, needs counterplay, but it feels like the more he's looking for it, Denis is reacting correctly and actually taking bigger advantages of some of these, moves that are just thrown out there, like g5, like retreating the knight to b8.
Yeah, these were all very risky moves that Hikaru knew were risky, but Denis has maneuvered perfectly, and at some point, black will just be staring at a bunch of liabilities. That could be the d5 pawn, could be the h6 pawn, and where's the counterplay?
Yeah, so keep in mind that a pawn, a4, a5, that's going to be big counterplay, and it doesn't seem like much, but it could be the perfect distraction on the queen side for all the action that's going to happen in the center of the board and on the king side.
And why are we saying Denis is handling this well? Look at the position. Black has two knights. White has placed the pieces so well that the knights can't target anything. They've been restricted, and Hikaru is very good at counterplay with knights. But here, there's no counterplay, and at some point, you can start, again, playing a4, maybe e4, disconnecting the d5 pawn from the c4 pawn. Just, there's no entry squares, and then, yeah, that initiative is really, look at the clock, everything is just disappearing for Hikaru. This is really, really close to a technical win.
You called it, always looking for active counterplay. That's why he's so exciting to watch. But as you're seeing these moves, you just have to know that they are going to be better and better for Denis if he can find that correct continuation. Yeah. In this case, boldly capturing that pawn, there's no pawns left in front of that black king. Even though Hikaru's opening things up, it could be black's king that ends up in more trouble.
Well, this is all in for Hikaru. He knows that because opening up the position, actually, black's king is less safe. Rook f1. Why is that f-file so strong? Because Hikaru opened it up. He invited this. And now your queen doesn't even have any squares.
Yep.
E7, G7,
H3
D6
is a move that just kicks that knight out. Rook f4 doubles the rooks on the f-file. Rook f3 also heads to the G3 square. And look at this move, knight e4, a full invitation. The rook on f1 is looking directly at the queen. But is there a simple knight to G3, for example?
Yeah, knight G3. What is the move there? Maybe queen D6? Some hard moves to find.
Yep. Always
H3.
tricky in these positions. H3.
Things are hanging on by a thread here. Can you take on f6 and take on h6? Denis says no. He wants to keep the pieces on the board.
Look
Rook
at the
d5.
tactics.
Rook takes d5 and queen takes c4 is coming up after knight e5.
Yep. Yep, there's tactics there. There's tactics with queen takes e4 in some positions as well. But
Now knight g3 or rook d5. They both work. Hikaru under 20 seconds. Wow.
And he's resigned that one. It was knight g3. Played at the end. Should be noted that there was a very tricky idea that could have been played against knight g3 that you mentioned, Eric. So dodged that and played it at the right moment. Really impressive to keep this within a 1-point lead. Hikaru 4.5 to 3.5. And we're down with John Sargent in the studio.
Thank you very much, folks. Hikaru, we obviously had a technical pause earlier. It's not what anyone likes to see in esports, but in chess, you have different delays, esports versus over the board. Can you talk us through what went on this morning?
Well, I mean, it was the exact same issue as last night, unfortunately. There's some issue with the computer. Obviously, it shouldn't happen, but that's how it goes.
Look, there's no appeals committee, fair play committee waiting until after the end of a long game and like potentially a resolution later on. You managed to get things resolved in what, 5-10 minutes, and we even got the clock times back? That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that difficult to set up. I think ironically enough, I had a similar situation in 2020 against Alireza, of course, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal. But I, of course, messed up the game. It should have been a draw after that, but so be it.
Well, thank you very much, and best of luck in the 3+1 segment as well. Sure. Cheers. All right, guys, back to you on the stage. When we come back, of course, we'll have more 3+1 this time.